Leda, I'm going to turn it over to you, and
Okay.
I'm going to sit back and take notes.
Sure. Okay. So this is my first time doing a broadcast like this, so bear with me as I get used to it. I'm just going to share my screen, and I'm going to choose this one. And if you guys can confirm, can you see my Photoshop is up now?
Yeah, I can see it. But
okay, great. I want to make sure it's working because when I put this up, I can't see the other window.
Also, let me just say quickly too, for those who haven't been on a Hangout live event before, if things appear to be frozen suddenly, it helps just to refresh your screen, and so just refresh best, you know. Okay, that just want to get that.
Yeah, okay, so what I have up here is obviously Photoshop, and since that's what I'm going to be talking about, and this is a sketch I did. It's a self-portrait of me with my pigeon ragweed. It was for this project called Meet the Artist, which was a meme that was going around from digital artists, but so I'm just going to show you how I work. And so let's see how to start. So with the Children's Book Academy, you get a really good benefit of working with people and teachers who really, really, really care about you and really care about where you're going to go and making sure that you are getting as much information as you can and like feeling like you're in a good place to succeed. So we really like helping with that, and that's why we have like the interactive Facebook groups, and we check those every day basically, and we have a lot of like me, including Mira and whoever like are the co-teachers for Mira's other courses, will always check in on that, as well as Mira's assistants who are like so ridiculously helpful. So you always get this really great sense of community with the Children's Book Academy that you don't get at other courses, or online courses specifically, like lynda.com, which is you just watch videos and you don't actually get to talk to anyone. And while my course offers like tons of videos as well as a lot of text for everyone to read, it's much more interactive and friendly and exciting. So I guess I'll just talk about what I'm going to do. So I'm going to pick a skin color for myself. And this is just my swatches panel that I'm scrolling through here, and I'm going to pick an arbitrary one. And I'm using my brush, and I'm just filling in my skin color. And you'll notice down on the layers panel, I have the sketch layer, which is that brown stuff, and lines, which are my finished like sort of ink lines. And I put my glasses on a separate layer because I actually wanted them to be purple instead of black, which is what they are in real life. So just a little added thing. And I had done this beforehand if that wasn't obvious already, but I sketched it out with just like, I have this pencil brush, and it's really easy to just be very loose and use the eraser, just erase parts. It's not like a work of art or anything. And if you'll see these little chunks missing here, it's when I take the lasso tool and I can select any area, and with the move tool I can move it around. So Photoshop is like, if you're like me and you're not a perfect sketcher, like whenever I draw things I can't get it exactly in the right spot most of the time, you know, instead of having to erase it and then redraw it again like in traditional work, Photoshop you can just select it and move it to wherever you want in the drawing. Oh, and there's also the wonderful thing called undo, which is my favorite. It's just Control Z or Command Z if you're on a, hit save, if you're on a Macintosh. So if I just keep going back, I can just completely undo everything I've done basically. So it's so helpful, like if I make a mark outside of it, or if I do, let's say, the wrong color, like, oh no, I start calling myself a really bright Simpsons yellow, I can just undo it and it's gone. Whereas in traditional work, it'd be like the worst mistake ever. So, and I did it again, see? So undo and no problem. So I'm going to continue doing my skin tone a little bit. And so, as I mentioned, there's a lot of video tutorials, and they are sped up a little bit just because I'm not a quick artist. It does take me a little bit of time. So if it were in real time, you'd be very, very, very bored. They take hours. So I sped them up a bit so it's a little bit more interesting, but I have a voiceover where I just talk and walk you guys all through exactly what I'm doing and exactly what part of Photoshop I'm using. And then there's a lot of cool features where I can zoom into different parts of the window, which is what I can't do in the Google Hangouts, but it's really fun. And Photoshop is my favorite tool, and it's what I use primarily for all of my work. I think like 99% of the time I always use Photoshop. I might sketch traditionally, but that's when I do paint, I mostly just paint for myself. There's no pressure. So I like that Photoshop sort of alleviates the pressure for me a little bit because I know that I can go in and like, I've gone outside the lines here and I can just erase it very easily and very easily change and manipulate different things. So it's very, very, very helpful. And for people who are, I like to say that I'm a little commitment scared. So if you're a little bit scared of commitment, especially with artwork, like most artists are, I think, Photoshop is a really great tool to have because it gives you so much more freedom to work on other things. And I'm not going to do a very good job of this just because I know I only have half an hour, and it would take me much longer than that, as I've mentioned. So let's say that's my base skin layer. I can rename my layers so that I don't get lost, and I recommend doing this all the time, which is super fun. I can create new layers. I'm going to label this one clothes. And I'm going to pick whatever color I want for a shirt. And I can just start coloring my shirt literally any color that I want. And because it's on a layer that's over the skin layer, you'll notice that these places where I went over the lines, I can just easily cover that up and you wouldn't even know that I painted underneath it. So it's like when you do traditional painting, all your layers of painting will be on top of one another, and it's really good to build up your layers. And with Photoshop, you can do sort of the same thing, but you have a lot more control. And if I wanted to move the layers, it's very easy. I can just move it, and then the skin shows up on top of where I painted the clothes, or move it back, and it's underneath again. Oh, another thing that's really great, if any of you are scared because you are not familiar with Photoshop or computers, don't worry, because the course, the Photoshop course, is basically 2 courses in one. I know Mira wants me to stress that. It's basically 2 courses for the price of 1 course. So you get 1 course, which is the beginning parts. I'm moving my hands and I keep stop drawing, but because I think you can see me. But so yeah, so it's 2 courses in one. The first part really shows you just all of the bits of Photoshop that you would need to know. I also have everyone set Photoshop to look the same because you can have these things called workspaces. And I have a custom one, but if you set it all to the same workspace, Photoshop will look the same across the board for everyone. So you don't get lost, because I know that's very easy to do. And with computers, they're fairly complicated. So, but yeah, so the first course walks you through. It's especially good for illustrators who are mainly traditional illustrators and who want to just use Photoshop to tweak their traditional work. So if you're a traditional painter, you can use it to tweak your painting. One of the great things that it can do, and this is shown in the first part of the course, so you get it really fast, but let's say if I don't like this color that I've chosen for my shirt, I can really, really, really easily change it by going to an adjustment menu called Hue and Saturation. And I can just drag the slider around, and you'll notice that the color of my shirt changes. And it can be whatever color I want. I can also change how saturated it is, so I can make like a neon green shirt or a neon yellow. or I could bring the saturation down so it's more of a muted blue or whatever color I decide to change it to. So that's super helpful. So if you painted one of your characters and you actually don't like the dress color you gave them, or even if the skin tone is a little bit too alien, which happens with me a lot, it'll just be a little bit too pink or a little bit too purple or something, you can really easily just do the skin tone, and I can even show that with here, where I could move the skin tone to be a little bit different. You could make an alien where they are just having a completely out of this world skin tone. But so that's something that's very helpful. Another thing is that you can change. So if you've done a sketch, I'm just going to hide my other layers here so you only get the sketch. If you've done a sketch and the lines are pretty light, you can do this thing called levels, which I brought up here. And you basically, it just allows you to change how light and how dark the sketch gets. So if I bring this white slider all the way over, you'll notice it just keeps getting lighter and lighter and lighter. And if I do the same thing with dark slider, it gets darker and darker and darker until it becomes pure black, basically. So if you've done a pencil sketch and you scan it in and it's very gray and not very saturated, or not saturated, but contrasted, which happens a lot because scanners they try very hard, but they're not perfect, you know. No, all scanners will do this, so you can just bring it all the way up and it'll be black like you want it to. Or if you've done ink line work and the ink is showing off as a gray instead of the pure black that you painted in originally, then you can just make it black in Photoshop. And
Leda, I've got a I got a nice question. Joel's already answered it. A text illustrator for Liliana, but she was asking the difference between. Well, first of all, let's just address this for traditional illustrators. Why Photoshop, and then the difference between Photoshop and Illustrator, and the two different Adobe.
Sure. So I'll do the difference between Photoshop and Illustrator first, because that's a pretty that's easier for me to explain, I think. So the difference is that Photoshop is, Photoshop is how is to make things like paintings, which there's variations in the brush, and there's variations in the color, I mean, not the colors, but in the shapes, the shapes can be easily rough or soft edges. And Illustrator works in these things called vectors. And what a vector is it's basically a sharp-edged shape. So if I draw, actually, I'll just do, Illustrator basically works like this shape tool. So I'm going to drag and draw an oval. I'll just fill it in with a bright orange color here. And so what happens with vector work is that you can resize it to any size and the edge will stay the same. And while this does happen in Photoshop, once it's saved as a JPEG, it becomes what's called a raster image. I explained this in the Photoshop course too. Yeah, but it becomes what's called a raster image, which means it has pixels. So if I set that shape, and I'm going to zoom in really, really, really far, you'll see that these little squares pop up. Oh, this is so, I'm at 12,000 or 1,200% right now. So each square is a pixel. And if this were a vector shape, it would still be a clear, even, smooth line without any pixelization showing up. And so vector illustrations are really great for things like logos that need to be printed at different sizes. But for things like children's books that pretty much have a set size, you can totally do illustrations with Illustrator, and I know a lot of artists that are really amazing at that, but Photoshop gives you a lot more freedom. Let's see, it's hard to describe. So with Illustrator, you can have these gradients to use for shading, but otherwise to make shading, you kind of have to just layer shapes on top of each other, and you can do that by changing the opacity. So a shape would be less opaque and they'd build off of each other. And for some people that think that way, it's really fun, and it is fun just to do in general. Like I've done a few illustrations like that, but I much prefer just like the painting feel to it. And so I hope that explains it a little bit.
Yeah, it kind of does, and
Okay.
and I know there are different good reasons for either one. But
Yes.
what would you say to the traditional illustrator who works in traditional medium about
Mhm.
why bothering to learn Photoshop in particular, since that's your
Yeah, yeah.
talking about?
So obviously the world is moving towards a very digital end, you know. I don't know the word, but a lot of editors and art directors will really prefer that you send digital files and not just traditional pieces because A, it's cheaper, and B, it's safer because you will keep your original artwork and you can scan it in and bring it into Photoshop and change it however you like, and you can send it to the art director and they have their high definition copy, but if they lose it or if something happens on the internet where the file gets destroyed by some sort of disaster, your original piece is still there, so you can still send it to them again and your original file is still there. Whereas if it was your original piece that you were sending and it got lost in the mail, it's gone forever, and then they have to pay you to create a new piece of the same exact page, which is probably not exactly a very happy thing to do. I would be really, really sad if my work got lost in the mail. But another thing is that, like I was trying to say, is that Photoshop gives you so much freedom to change your traditional work. So if you have a painting, I don't have a painting, I don't think, but if you had a painting and you wanted to, again, like just change some aspect of it, or even move a character from the left side of the page to the right side of the page, or flip them so that they were facing the other way, which I can do really quick. And whoop, that was actually the one layer, but you can flip them so they're facing the other way. And if you're doing this traditionally, you could definitely do it through a scan, but if you're only a traditional artist, then you'd have to repaint the entire thing, or if you wanted to move, like if I wanted to move my ragweed character so that he was not on my arm anymore, but instead, I'm doing this poorly right now, but if he was not on my arm but instead on my shoulder, I could fairly easily flip him around and move him to be on my shoulder here. And I'm doing this very quickly so you can all see, but
Leda, you're doing great.
okay,
Yeah,
great.
you are, Leda.
And you can erase it so he's just over here. Made him look a little bit creepy. And so he's no longer on my arm like the sketch shows, but he's now on my shoulder. And so that's something that's you just can't do traditionally. You'd really have to just paint the entire thing over again, which is very disheartening. So yeah, if Mira or you guys could think of another example, then I'd be happy to demonstrate that. But that's the biggest example I can think of, is that you can so easily change anything in Photoshop without having the fear of commitment. You know?
Yeah. Liliana was following up her question with which of the two programs is harder, more difficult to learn, and you might just hit on that. We won't spend too much time tonight talking about Illustrator. It's a whole different program. But what would you just say to that by way of intro?
It's honestly, they're about the same. All Adobe programs work very similarly. So if you've learned one, you can very easily learn the other. So as an example, I have my tools over here. And in Illustrator, all of the tools are almost the same. There's a few different tools for each program, probably 5 or 6 different tools in each program that are specific to that program. And some tools might work a little bit differently, like the brush tool in Illustrator works very differently from the brush tool in Photoshop. But they're yeah, what was I say? They're both about the same. So I actually learned Illustrator first, and then moved to Photoshop because I liked the vector illustrations a long time ago when I was in high school, way back in the day when it was like Photoshop and Illustrator 7. So and now it's like CS6 now, but I think that's like 12 or 13 technically. So very long time ago, and I really liked, vector illustration, and through learning Illustrator, I was able to just easily learn Photoshop. So you kind of also get that benefit a little bit. Oh, another thing is that in the Photoshop course, you get a free InDesign tutorial so that you can easily figure out how to lay out your picture book or chapter book or whatever, because it's all basically the same principle, is just the different sizes. And
you walk students through making their dummy, their picture book dummy.
A picture book dummy, yeah. Or any book dummy.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so that's a really nice added benefit. So it's real, and like I said, because I recommend taking that going through that demo at the end of the course. But because you have gone through Photoshop with me, InDesign will be much easier to understand, and I didn't have to spend really any time describing the in-depth nuances of InDesign. Whoops, keep hitting that by accident.
Now, you're still talking to us about layers, aren't you? And you just moved a layer over with that little pigeon.
Yeah, so that would be a layer sort of. Pretty much layers are really absolutely indispensable, and just they make your life so much easier, and that's why I say it in the course too, but I recommend always using many layers. So even just with the minimal stuff that I've done now, I have 6 layers about. I actually would have had more, but I put my hair and my shirt on the same layer by accident.
Okay.
Which is actually, this is a good example, I guess. It's very easy to move it. I can just select it like this, and then I'm going to do I'm just going to do a cut, and then a paste, and it goes right there, but it's on a separate layer.
Yeah.
And not with the shirt anymore. So that's that's another thing. Love it when that happens. Or when it's easy to move them, at least sometimes. If I've painted too far.
Okay.
Let's see. I'm looking at my notes really quick just to make sure. Unless you have something to prompt me with.
Well, we're talking about layers tonight, and brushes, and merging pieces of art.
Yes.
And so if you guys have some burning questions, urgent questions about these techniques that she's showing us or the steps she's going through, go ahead and put them in there. We'll answer the ones that we can, but we'd like to save the more general questions or the questions about the course until the very end of both programs, you guys, for all of you out there. So so right now let's focus our questions on what she's showing us, and then we can talk more generally at the very end.
Yes. So I'll talk about brushes next, since I think that I'm getting slow on time.
Do you get used to having all those layers open and be working with all? It seems like a very linear way for a lot of
this. You do get used to it. Don't worry. It's it's like learning a new medium. Once you've gotten used to how the medium itself works, it becomes second nature. I actually find if I'm painting traditionally, what I'll do a lot is I'll hit Control, or my hand will do the muscle memory of Control Z or undo when I'm just on my desk. Or there'll be plenty of times where I'm like, oh, I wish I could make a layer. This would be so much easier.
Yeah. Well, I remember there was a time when mixing colors in watercolor or acrylic seemed like a very tedious, labor-intensive, linear process, and of course it's second nature very quickly. So I'm glad to hear it's the same kind of thing.
Yeah, it is. So and as you get along, as you learn the medium more, as the medium being Photoshop, you'll learn how many layers you yourself need. So some people like to have literally hundreds of layers, and other people like to paint on even just one layer, which I've seen. But I think when you're starting out, it's good to use a lot just so you learn the mechanic of them. And then like maybe a year or so later, once you've gotten really used to Photoshop, you can start being a little bit more picky and being like, well, I don't technically need a layer. Like,
Okay.
personally, I used to do, so I have my skin base layer, and I used to create a new layer to make the highlights, and then a new layer for the shadows.
Mm.
And so I could easily, like, move those around. But I find that I don't need them anymore, and I like just painting on the one skin layer for all the shadows and the highlights. So,
okay. Yeah.
But not other people might find that they don't like that. So it's totally just a preference thing. Just an example.
Tanya is asking, what color
Mhm.
palette do you have open right now?
Oh,
I never see that many colors on mine when she.
I have I think, oh god, it's been oh yeah, I have Pantone solid coated. Actually, solid and coated and uncoated, I really can't tell the difference, so I don't, if someone else can, that'd be great. But it's one of those, and there's hundreds of colors. I also like the, I think it's the True Match colors. That's another one that I like, which I can bring up.
Okay. Huh.
And it's like a nice rainbow of colors. But let's see if this is it. Solid coated. Nope, that's not it. I'll never find it again. Oh, there it is. It's a CMYK coated. So these ones are, CMYK is a color profile. Most images are RGB, which is red, green, blue. And CMYK is cyan, magenta, yellow, and K, which is key, and that means black. So.
Why are you seeing all these colors instead, and Tanya isn't? Did you import a bunch of palettes or?
Oh, these ones came default with Photoshop. If she's using the same palette and it's not showing all of those colors, then it might be a difference in the version of Photoshop, because I'm using CS5, so if she's using one that's much older, it's possible that maybe it doesn't come with that palette specifically. Usually the ones that are within a version of each other, like CS4, CS5, and CS6, I believe all have these palettes. So
great.
If you go further back than that, I have trouble remembering. So yeah, so let me just talk about brushes really quick. So you can have like hundreds of brushes in Photoshop that do different things. I've been using, let me make it really big. I've just been using this one, which is like something that I like. It's just a softer sort of not really textury, but it has a softer edge and a more interesting edge than other brushes. The default Photoshop brushes are a little boring. So for my taste, like this is one of them, and it's just a flat. It has this thing called transfer, so the lighter that your pressure is, the lighter the color is, and then the harder that your pressure is, the more opaque your color will be. But it's just a circle, and it's a little bit boring, but you can have brushes that do like these really fun textures, and I have brushes that look like paint. Like I have these watercolor brushes, and it sort of there's some of them are better than others. But this looks like paint, right? It looks, and it doesn't function exactly like watercolors do traditionally, because that's very hard to program, but
it looks kind of wet.
Yeah, but it looks wet. And these are not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is the paintbrush one of the brushes that you include in the course as a giveaway?
I didn't make any brushes to give away to people because I am terrible at making brushes. So if I gave you any, they'd be really bad. But this is part of a brush pack that I'm using that I mention a lot in the course from someone who does make really good brushes named Kyle T. Webster. So in the course there's a link to his, where you can go purchase his brushes, but it's very cheap. It's like a couple bucks or something for
that's great.
For like, I don't even remember how many, like, I don't know. I think I bought his mega pack, which has all of his brushes, which is like 500 brushes, and it was only like $10 or something.
Wow.
So,
that's cheaper than real brushes.
Yeah.
Yes.
They're cheaper than real. That's something about Photoshop. They are much cheaper than real brushes. So you can get all sorts of these textury looking effects. And I teach you how to make your own brushes, which you can do in Photoshop. as I mentioned, I'm really bad at it. I just don't really like there's some part of it that's not clicking in my brain for like, but how did he make it look so cool? you know? But and some people just have the talent. Like I have friends that are really good at it, and I'm like, I don't understand how you're just able to do it. It's probably like, you know, some people are really good with acrylic, and other people are really good with watercolor, but might not be good at both of them. So
yeah,
that's something for me. But you can I'll just take a basic brush, and you can change the multiple things about it, like the spacing so that it makes dots instead of a brush stroke, and shape dynamics. If I take that away, it's just going to be a flat, like there's no dynamics to it, it's just that size. But if I add shape dynamics, the lighter I press, the smaller the brush is, and the harder, the bigger it is. Running out of white space up here. And I go through every single one of these. It's one of the main lessons in the Photoshop course where I walk you through the entire process of making a brush and all of these options, which are very in-depth. So we don't have time for them.
I don't know if this is a brush question or not, but yeah. Kara's asking, I'm not new to Photoshop, but I'm always looking for the most streamlined way to bring textures into backgrounds to keep a handmade look. Any tips?
Yeah, actually, Mira mentioned to me that she really wanted to do it.
Yeah, I'll be covering that, love.
Great.
Yeah, so
Great,
she'll be showing it to you in a little bit. But yeah, definitely very easy to bring textures into Photoshop. Let's see. Okay, so I think, like, are there any other brush questions that you can see, or possibly other?
Okay, Mary's asking, do you have to have CS6 to take your course? That's a course question. We really should have course questions. Yeah, you say no.
Yeah, I mean,
in fact, you say something interesting in the course itself. I remember a line that you said. Some illustrators who are working today, some top illustrators, are still using the very first Photoshop program they bought that when it very first came out. So
they are, which is crazy. So I know. And they're really good artists too, which is what's crazy. I'm like, man, you guys really did it. I don't need to update. I like to keep up to date just because I'm that kind of person. But
curious.
Yeah, just curious, and especially if there's certain, like, they always introduce new tools and stuff. Like something that they don't have in older versions of Photoshop is like a content-aware fill, which means that Photoshop decides what to fill into a space because of what's around it. It's very complicated, but you can go watch videos of how it works. So it's one of Adobe's prized features. But back to the course questions. That no, it's a little bit yes too, because if you do have Photoshop 7 or something very old, it's going to be very different, and that's just because Photoshop 7 is almost 10 or 12 years old now, so they don't even sell it in stores, I don't think. So if you're looking to buy Photoshop for the course, then you can totally get, you'll be getting like a more modern version. One of the students that I have currently is using CS4, and there were a couple differences, but she asked in the Photoshop group if she was confused about something, and I was able to show or tell her exactly where it was located. Like there was something in like the layers panel was in a slightly different place, and I was just and I added that into the course as well. So now future students with CS4 will have that information as well, so they don't necessarily have to ask in the Photoshop course Facebook group.
Great.
But I'm very, very responsive to questions on the Facebook group because I want to make sure everyone is getting their fill. Oh, I just noticed in the chat that someone was asking if I'm using a Cintiq, and I am using a Intuos tablet. That's the tablet brand or name. It's from Wacom. I use an Intuos because I am too poor to afford a Cintiq. The Cintiqs are very expensive. And I do have a tablet guide that's like 5 or 6 pages long. I don't know. It's a very long tablet guide in the Photoshop course that walks you through not only Wacom tablets, but also alternative brands that are a little bit more affordable, but apparently just as good. I haven't used it personally, but I've seen a lot of really good reviews for them. So when I need to upgrade, I'm actually going to get one of those off brands because it's just a little bit kinder to my wallet.
Okay, great. Interesting.
Yeah. Oh, and Lisa mentioned in the chat that there's a free trial of, you can get a 1-month free trial for Photoshop online. They offer it for, actually, Adobe offers it for all of their programs. You can get a 1-month free trial. And if you're going to do the course, it's about 1 month long if you do it every day, I would say, possibly. Like every day for like 8 hours. Like if it was your job. So yeah, or like 4 to 5
Leda,
weeks.
can you let folks know that it's time flexible?
Oh yeah, but it is time flexible. Yeah, so it's a self-paced, so you have it for a full year, and you can take as long as you want to learn it in that year. So there's no rush, at least on our courses side. So yeah.
Okay. Okay. Do you want to move on to merging?
Yeah,
merging
and
pics?
I just have to open up that file.
Okay.
Forgot to open it. You're gonna see. I'm gonna move it to the other side so you don't have to see my messy computer file system.
and let's not forget to let Mira do the textures too. That will be interesting.
Yeah.
Everybody loves textures, it seems, in Photoshop.
Yeah, which is nice.
Yeah.
Let's see.
Are we ready for me?
No.
Actually, if she wants to do it right now, while I get this ready, that'd be totally fine with me.
Yeah. And Leda, how much longer is your presentation about?
Like probably like 5 minutes.
Well, why don't you finish yours and then we'll go into textures and.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that way Mira will have her screen share up all at one time.
Yeah. Okay, 1 sec. Let me get this back up.
Oh no.
Here we go.
Good.
Oh, I remember where it is. I'm sorry, I just had a blank on where I put the file.
While you're doing that, I want to put your website back up for everybody, so it'll be in the. I encourage you guys to take a look at Leda's website. You can see all the different looks she comes up with in Photoshop, and I'm sure she uses other programs too. But you can see all the different kinds of art and assignments she's tackling too with these tools. So I'll
and Mark.
Yeah.
Yes.
Will you share the link for the course and let people know that right now we're having a sale? It's normally $149, and we're basically doing a third off, so it's $99.
Great. Let me put that link up, and so this is the link to the sales page for the course and the information page. You can read more about what she's offering, and it has the special price, the sale price Mira's talked about. So hang on just a second.
So yeah, is it okay if I talk?
Yeah, it's great.
Okay. So here are the files. This is an old painting of mine. It's a watercolor painting that I did of. It's just a montage of how they make dyes. So it was a very big painting, and so I just scanned it in 2 runs. So there's the right side and then the left side here, which is something that many illustrators will come into conflict with, since the average scanner is only 8.5 by 11, and anything larger immediately becomes ridiculously expensive. So unless you want to take a photo, which you have to light and basically bring it to a photo studio with, is like just not fun, you know. Not many of us have access to professional photo studios. So I've scanned in both of these, and what you can do in Photoshop, which is really easy, is Photoshop has this thing called Photomerge. Let me I barely ever use it, so I just gotta find it really quick.
Okay. Can I ask you a question while you're looking through?
Yeah.
You're probably a good multitasker. Well, Janine was asking you a really good question. You know, one of the Creative Cloud defaults is Lightroom monthly, and so she's saying if you subscribe to Lightroom, you get Photoshop with it, constantly updated as time goes by, so always current, different monthly pricing. So. Can you talk about that a little bit? I know when I when I started renting Photoshop, I had Lightroom packaged with it. It's like Tweedledum and Tweedledee. What is Lightroom?
I'm gonna have to be honest and say that I'm not super familiar with it, but I do believe that it is something very, very, very geared for photographers, where it's like a lighter version of Photoshop where you can edit your photos in it, and I guess it opens faster and stuff. Because I'm not a photographer, I haven't really used it. I do have it because it comes packaged. I just never actually used it.
Yeah, Photoshop was originally put out there as for photographers, wasn't it? It wasn't, and then somehow the artists.
Yeah.
So.
Okay.
Okay.
So you go to File, Automate, and whoop, down here is Photomerge. ... Give it a second. There we go. So this is the Photomerge panel, and you actually don't have to have your images open to do this. I just wanted to show you what they. Basically, all you have to do is just keep auto selected, which is the easiest. And I go to Browse, and then I go and find it in my computer. And there we go. And then I just click, so I've got 1 and 2, like I have up here, and I just click OK. And it might take a second as Photoshop figures it out. There we go. Almost done.
Hey, Annika's asking, are you scanning traditional artwork, or are you drawing on a Wacom or both, a tablet or both?
Wacom, whatever.
Yeah, whatever. I actually don't even know if it's how it's supposed to be pronounced. But I am drawing on a tablet almost 100% of the time.
So the girl character, she was drawn on a tablet. Yeah.
Yes, 100% on the computer.
Very fine.
Yeah, I just have like I said, I have this like brush that looks like a pencil, which I love. So it doesn't need to look like a pencil. It's just more familiar because I started out traditionally. Anyway.
And I've heard Wacom because it's in the state of Washington.
I don't even know.
Have you heard that rumor that they're located there? So.
Is that where they are? I know that they're like a mainly a Japanese company, but I don't know. However you want to pronounce it. Okay. I'm sure the people will be able to figure it out.
Okay.
So this is the Photomerged image, and Photoshop did all the work for me, which is great. You can see here in the layers panel that there's the 2 images together, and if I hide one layer, you can see that Photoshop cuts out its own little outline, and it fills it in with the other image. So if I were going to do this manually, which you can, you have to sort of finagle it and move it just ever so little. I mean, I guess I could demonstrate it really quickly. Let's see. That's not wide enough. Also, I think I just heard a cat.
No, that was some young people outside my window.
Oh, never mind. I thought it was one of Mira's cats. Got excited.
They sounded a bit like a cat.
Yeah. So I can move this from one file to another, which I go over more. I'm doing it very quickly here, and just kind of hopefully place it correctly. And what you can do is you just bring down the opacity so it's see-through, and then you just kind of move it so that it's correct. But you'll see that because of when I scanned it, I couldn't put the paper down completely flat, so there's a little bit of overlapping here, you'll notice.
Yeah.
Where the paper just, even it's tilted a little bit. You can notice it going back and forth. It's just from how it was scanned, and I can fix that manually, but it takes so long. This is how it was.
That seam line, those seam lines, do those disappear? I'm thinking how to correct an image on the left-hand side of your double-page spread watercolor.
I can move this in and out too. I can move both of them totally, and this one moves separately, and then this one also moves separately. This is getting a little weird. I'm
very handy.
Yeah, so it's very, very helpful. And if you prefer to do it manually like this, then that's totally fine. If somehow one of the scans was smaller than the other one, you can increase or decrease the size of the scan so it would line up, but these ones are actually the same size. So, but yeah, I could totally make it smaller.
Wow.
It's very easy to resize things in Photoshop. But anyway, so it is a little bit like it kind of works, but not really, and I have to make sure this edge isn't visible and all that stuff. But if I just have Photoshop do it, it's just perfect. So
you could merge photographs together to make a banner.
Yeah, or like a panorama. Sort of thing. Yeah. So even if the pictures were like a little bit weird looking, Photoshop, like if it was like at one angle versus another angle, Photoshop will fix that for you when you do Photomerge, and it should work 100% of the time. I mean, if it's a really, really, really fuzzy image, or if it like you moved when you were taking the photograph, then it might have a little bit of trouble just because I think it matches it up based on each pixel. It just like scans each one, which I can go really far into, and you can sort of see the little squares start to appear. Yeah, so obviously as a human being, I'm not going to do that.
Wow.
Do not have the patience for that.
Amazing software. Yeah,
it's really, 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 it's so powerful, and it can do so many things.
Yeah, and I mean, look at that. It's really hard it's impossible to know that was digital. It totally looks like watercolor.
Yeah.
Well, this one specifically was watercolor.
You imported, what's the word? You imported a watercolor traditional piece.
Yes, yeah, because when you're doing it digitally, you won't have to do this.
Okay.
That's a benefit of digital. Yeah. You can change the size of the canvas at any time. So if you need more space, it's no problem.
So, Margaret, I don't understand what your question. So we're not using a computer to do this program. Well, you would be using a computer.
Yes.
I'm not quite sure of your question there. She was saying if we need Photoshop for this course, do you have a link for the one we should use? And she covers that. If you become a student in the course, she goes into great detail about giving you options and lots of information about the different softwares, and then the tablets, like she said, a PDF with all your options and the pros and cons of each one. She covers that very well.
And there's lots of pictures.
There are lots of screenshots and the videos and the text.
Yes. So try to make it as user-friendly and easy to understand as possible.
Yeah. Great. Well, that was fantastic. Do you want to? Are we ready to go over to
I think so.
The textures, and then let's save there'll be more questions, I'm sure, about the course, but let's save those to the end of the workshop. And then if you just came just to hear Leda's part of the workshop, you can pick this up on the recording and hear more about Leda's course at the very end. Just fast forward. But I think you're going to enjoy hearing Mira's presentation on textures, and then she's going to talk about perfect pitches, and it behooves every illustrator to learn some things about writing, because that's where you can start calling the shots better as a creative creator, is when you know how to write and draw. Your double threat. So in closing this little training session, is there anything you wanted to sort of, did you want to put a cap on this or tie a ribbon around the very topic of brushes, layers, and merging images?
Oh gosh, I'm so bad at closing statements.
You don't have to make one.
It's just, Photoshop is just like this. I just put up what my final was. Like I was recoloring it for you guys, but this was the final that I had done. So you can see just what an end product would look like. Photoshop is just so useful in so many different ways. Like I can even, like here I've added text, which you can add text to Photoshop in any sort of way. So. And
it looks handmade. It looks friendly. It looks personable. Yeah. It doesn't look like the old computer art that we remember seeing.
No, yeah, Photoshop has come so
It's this lovely, handmade. It's like we're used to seeing good art, and that's why this is children's book illustration style here in graphic novel, and it's just
quality illustration.
Quality illustration. It's fine art. I think of it as fine art. And she's a lot of fun. That character, she's just great. Wow.
Like you said, it's just Photoshop has come so far. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen now. From way back in the day where everything looked very plasticky. I actually show you specifically how to not make it look plasticky currently, so that because art directors prefer that, I know. So,
wonderful.
So Leda, Leda, can you stick around for the end for
I'm going to
questions?
stay here the whole time.
Okay, great.
Hi, everyone. Leda did a beautiful job. You can see why I really, really miss having her as an assistant. And she kind of, started in midstream in some ways, because in the course, we start at the very, very beginning, where she goes over all the tools. She gives you different options of different kinds of Wacom tablets and what tablets are and what they do, and inexpensive ones to get. Tablets, if you want to do art on a computer, you really need to get a tablet. It makes it so much easier because you're not doing like the claw.
Yes. The dreaded claw.
Here's mine, and I use it all the time. I use it instead of a mouse because it's just so much kinder on the hand.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm going to give me one sec here, and I'm just going to do a real quickie here.
Okay.
I'm going to make this a little smaller by doing Command minus, and I'm on a Mac, so things will look a little different. And my poor computer's a bit hot, so am I, and that's because I can't have the AC on right now because it's so darn noisy. Okay, so here we go. Here's the layers. You find the layers under the, it's either, here it is under Window. And I prepared just a little bit in advance. I have a folder on my computer full of all different kinds of textures because I love working with textures. And here, all of this is outlined. This has all got a black outline. The outline can be any color you like. But it makes it really easy for working using textures the way I like to use them. So I'm just going to turn, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the wand tool. Here it is over here. And let's move this here. And I like to use the keyboard command, so that's a W. And because this has got a black border around the edge, and this is all defined by black, defined by a black outline, it selects that area there. If you look on the layers over here on the right, I've got this layer here that I've got turned off right now, which I'm going to turn on. And I've got this thing called a mask here. And masks are totally cool. So let me turn that on and I'll show you what a mask does. So you can see I selected it on this layer. Now I'm coming to this layer here. And, Leda will teach you all about layers in the course. Don't worry, layers are your friends, as is the mask tool. So that whole wall area has been selected. But I want to keep that wall. Oh, actually, you know what? I'm going to go back here. And I'm also going to include this bit of wall too. So I'm going to hold the Shift key. I'm still in, I'm on the wrong layer. And I'm going to go back here. And I'm going to add this to it. And now I'll come here. And I want to invert it. So I want to select everything except the wall area. So to do that, I do Command Shift I. And you'll see that it'll change. And you can also do it through the select menu at the top. As I said, I'm really hooked on doing the keyboard commands. Then I'm going to go here to the layer mask, and I'm going to delete it.
Oh, Mira, we actually can't see your layer panels or anything like that.
We just see the drawing board with the metrics on it.
Yeah.
You can't see my layers panel?
No.
We can't see your workspace except for the drawing itself.
Yes.
Oh, that sucks. Why is that?
That's kind of, I don't know, it's very weird. Oh, did you tell it to show the entire screen or just the window or active program or something? Because something about Hangouts is it asks you to choose what you want to share, And if you choose like just the window, it'll just show. If you chose, it's a bunch of options and they're not very clear.
Okay, I'm going to stop screen sharing and I'll do it again.
Try it again. Oh, that's a good idea.
Okay.
This is also a tutorial in the course as well, so. If
okay.
It's also a tutorial on Hangouts themselves.
Yeah, right.
So here it says, Google Hangouts would like you to share the content of your screen with plusgoogle.com. Choose what you'd like to share.
And there should be one that just says screen 1 or...
here it is, entire screen.
Yeah, there you go.
Thanks, love.
Ah, it's me.
Here we go. So can you see my lovely layers now?
Yes.
Yeah, we can.
Yay.
Good. And so here, this is the mask tool. Here's what it looks like when it's masked. I deleted, remember I inverted and then I deleted everything except the wall area that I had selected on this layer down here. And when you use the mask tool, I always like to use it on erase. Leda likes to use it with the brush. But with the erase, you want the black at the bottom because the black is what the mask is. And so you see how it's masked here. And what's beautiful about this, I'm going to deselect this. And I'm going to go in and I'm still on the mask layer. I'm going to toggle that black to the front. And I'm still in the erase tool. Oops. Now I'm in the brush tool. And I'm on there. And so I can totally bring that back and forth. Now I'm going to bring it back again. Let's make that brush a little bigger. So you can either do it with the brush tool or you can do it with the erase tool. Here I'm going to do the same thing I'm going back to and see how I've got some of these labeled. Leda's much better than I am at labeling things. Leda's pretty amazing, as you've probably figured out by now. And it was pathetic when she was leaving. I was pathetic when she was leaving. So I'm just selecting all this blue here, and I'm going to bring some texture in here. So I'm using the wand tool, and then I'm going onto this layer here. And you see I've got this texture that I've made. It's acrylic. I'm going to go on here, onto the mask. And you want to have your mask already there before you do any selecting. And we go into the selection tools in the course. Otherwise, it just makes everything black. So now, once again, I'm going to do, let's see if I'm going to use it this way. Inverse, Command-Shift-I. And now I'm going to do delete. And so we've got this fun texture happening back here. And I'm just going to do one more. And that's going to be her dress. And so I'm using blues in the background because blues recede, and then I want to have the warmer colors in the front.
Mira, so, can you explain what the texture is? I'm not sure everybody understands that it's just a JPEG or it's just something where you paint it.
Yeah, it's just a JPEG. Here's another texture that I could use. Why don't I bring a texture in and show you? So here's some swirly stuff.
She might have scanned that on her scanner, or it could be something she's painted.
Or I could have just downloaded it from the internet. And you always want to make sure it's legal.
Yeah.
So that it's copyright free, or you pay for one, Shutterstock or something like that.
In the course, there's a resources page, and I actually give a bunch of links to free stock texture websites. So
fabulous. The course, I mean, if anyone's taken any of our courses, you'll know that we always over-deliver. It's really important, to put it mildly. Leda's laughing. Yeah. Okay, so once again, here I am back on this layer. I'm selecting the dress. Oops, and remember I told you about here's my layer with but look what happens if I put the mask on. It really messes things up. See how everything's all black? So I'm going to undo that. And so I'm going to deselect, which is Command D. I'm going to go here. I'm going to make the mask on this layer. So I'm not affecting the actual artwork, the actual swirly stuff. I'm just affecting the mask. So let's go back here again, turn that off, and let's go back to the wand tool, W. I'm turning this on again. I'm going here, I'm going onto the mask, and I'm inverting Command-Shift-I, and I'm deleting. Yay!
Yay! Well done.
And I'm going to go Command-Shift-I, and I'm just going to reinvert to bring it just back to this layer with the clothing. And you can see how I can really build, you know. And one of the things that's really fun is you can play with opacity. So if I want that to be a lot lighter. But I like the intensity of that. Whoops. And I think I'm going to go here to the blue, and I'll play with the opacity on that. Oh, I want more than that. Okay. So 90 is pretty good. So you can see how I can just keep building and building. I'm going to try one last thing, and go back to this layer. Whoops, I'm turning this on. This is rather lovely, isn't it? It might be too close to the skin color, I don't know. Make that a mask, turn it off so I can see, go back here, select the table. I mean, it's so instant gratification. Command-Shift-I to invert and remove everything except the areas that I want. And ta-da! Ta-da! And it is too close to the skin color, but there's so much that you can do to change that color. And oh, I would so love to show you, but Leda shows you all that stuff in the course. Well, let me show you just real quick. So I'm just copying that. Let's bring it in here. Oops. I didn't invert it, but that's fine because I just want to show you some color things really quick. Image, adjust, color balance, so I can play with all of these. And I would probably want to make it, that's rather nice, isn't it?
Yeah.
Talk about instant gratification.
Talk about fast.
Oh, that's gorgeous. But I've got the wrong area selected because I didn't invert it. Another thing that I could do is I could image, adjust, color balance. No, we did color balance. Let me show you image, adjust, hue, saturation. And that's really fun as well.
Yeah, I went over that briefly.
You went over this?
Yeah.
Good. Okay. So there we go. That's it for layers from Mira.
Thank you, Mira.
So
yeah, that was neat. It can make a drawing look like whole different kinds of drawings for sure.
Yeah.
So
is this a story about the invention of the skateboard, a nonfiction?
No, it's why Mona gets her smile, and it's a little kid that makes up this whole story. It's because she sees the word macaroni in the sky, and then she wants to figure out what macaroni is, and she's an inventor. We've got this little white thing here, and I'm not sure what that is. I'll figure that out later, but it'd be fine. There's so many ways to correct any boo-boo, but that was just a quick and dirty look at working with textures, and you can totally build textures by putting different layers and fooling around with the opacity. You can also do different kinds of, lighting, and it's so amazing what you can do, and the course is pretty phenomenal for teaching all of that for only $99 right now.
Yeah, it's a fantastic course, and it's. I might even make a little review video of it and put it up so you can see some of the interior of the course and just all the content that Leda and Mira provide. And Leda is so thorough and so personable, user-friendly. It's just a great way to be introduced and then to go to the intermediate level in Photoshop, in my opinion. So anyway, yeah, great course. I'm going to put the link up for it one more time. And Joel's got a really good question while you're kind of gearing up, Mira, about Photoshop. Leda, he says, how do you know when? This is a great question. When you have over photoshopped a piece of art.
So that is a really good question. So it's kind of also related to how do you know when you've overworked any piece of art, but a good way to tell how you've overworked a Photoshop piece is, at least something for me, is that often when I'm working on something, I might zoom in a little bit too far, which is a little bit of a great thing and not so great thing about Photoshop. And I'll do a lot of detail into this one little aspect of my illustration, and when I zoom out, it's actually only like 1 inch big. And I'm like, that's when I need to know that I'm like, okay, I need to just go away for a second and really think about what I'm drawing here, because I'm getting too caught up in the details. And another thing is obviously the often dreaded plasticky look. The plasticky look works for certain types of illustrations, but when you're something I stay away from is keeping everything so blended, because in Photoshop you can just keep going. There's no stopping you from blending. And you can blend stuff so far that it's just like a pure gradient. And while it's perfect, like a perfect blend, it doesn't actually look good in the end. And actually keeping a sort of messy, seeing the brush strokes and seeing this very simple looking aspect of the illustration in the background, really, you would, when you're doing it, you'll say to yourself, oh, everyone's going to notice that I didn't render that part of the illustration well enough. But there are so many artists that you look at their art and like, this art is beautiful, but then when you look at it really close, you're like, oh, I can see exactly where he used what brush in Photoshop, and there's a texture there that I know I have, and just these little bits there, it's like I can see all of his brush strokes, So I hope that answers the question a little bit.
Yeah, it kind of does, and I think it kind of goes back to with traditional art. Step away from your piece, step across the room and look at it. Yeah,
you really have to step away from it and make sure, or even just go away for an hour and come back with a little bit of more of a clear mind.
Yeah, and Annika, the banner art on the Google Live event page, that was actually a Google piece of art. It's not something any of us did, and I'm sure it was digitally done, but
it is digital.
Talk to it. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Google has a bunch of artists who are amazing, and you can follow them on a bunch of their social medias. But they're all digital artists.
It can look really cool like that.
I could actually tell you how this one was done.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, but I want Mira to be able to do her thing. So.
Leda's will be up for all year.
It starts whenever you want.
It starts whenever you want at your own pace. You've got a year to go through the material. You can easily do that. Yeah. It's jam-packed, but it's very approachable. You can get through it very quickly and learn so much very quickly. That's what I like about this kind of course. So we won't take up any more of y'all's time, but we're going to end the broadcast. Type your thank you notes in there to Mira. If you have any questions about the course that you'd like them to address, I'm sure if you put your questions in the chat box, they'll get back to you and you can see it on the page. You can see their answers. We'll see you in the next online adventure. Okay.
Yeah.
Good night, everybody. Bye-bye.
Good night. Bye.